Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this evening session on the MIAD 802, which is titled The International Polities, Theory and Practice. So for all, please just notify me if you can see me. I can see myself at the moment as I'm talking, but just notify. Can somebody just unmute himself or herself to just notify if you can see me, please? Can somebody just unmute himself or herself? Please, I just need communicate. I'm not seeing if you're texting a message, I'm not seeing the message. Just want
I
to be
can
sure.
see you. I
Thank you
can
very,
see you.
thank you very much. Now, so this course is all about international politics, the theory and the practice. So, which means that there is no way we'll do this course that you will not talk about the realism, liberalism, and other theory involved in international relations. So, for you to understand this topic, for you to understand this concept, like this course in general, you need to first ask yourself what is politics, what make politics international, and what structural conditions shape the behavior of politics in the world. That is, on what structure is politics existing in international political system. The first thing we need to look at, the first question we need to answer in this mode one is what is politics? What is politics? Understand? So, in a nutshell, politics is one of the most contested concepts in social science because there are a lot of definitions. You define politics based on your perspective. Understand? So, but the one that is common, the one that is popular is politics is who get what, when, and how. That is, when you say who get what, we are talking about people fighting for an interest, fighting for something, contesting for something. Who get what? When do they get it? Either through election, either through crisis, but there is a particular time they get that interest they are looking for. That interest can be power, and how they get it also. Understand? So, in essence, definition of politics is that it's very diverse. So, it's very broad. So, there is no acceptable definition of politics. But one of the definition that we can accept is politics is a struggle for power among nations. Understand? Politics is a struggle for power among nations. Understand now? So, you need to know that when you say politics is a struggle for power among nations, we are talking about struggle for leadership. Struggle for leadership. That is, the leaders want to take over power, right? So we now say politics is a struggle of power among nations. And this definition was given to us by Hans Morgenthau. That's Hans. Hans Morgenthau is Morgenthau. So he's a realist. So he gave the definition based on the realistic perspective. So he said politics is a struggle for power. So Max Weber also proceeded to give us a definition of politics. He said politics is about influence, control, and the ability to shape outcome. Max Weber said politics is about influence, control, and the ability to shape outcome. So, in essence, this definition is given to us by realists. And when they define politics, you can see that politics sometimes it can be coercive, it can be military power, it can be in form of power militarily. That is, sometimes you see military taking over power and they are playing politics with it. Sometimes it can be persuasive, that is diplomatic. Understand? Sometimes it can be ideological, that is soft power. Sometimes they use ideological means to serve as politics also. So, in essence, what I just want you to understand is there is no generally acceptable definition of politics. So, there is no generally acceptable of definition of politics. So, you can have your own definition of politics. Understand? You can have your own definition of politics based on the perspective you look at politics. Understand? But what I personally say in most of my class, why I teach about politics about who get what, when, and how. Understand now? who get what, when, and how. So that is about politics. Now, when you look at politics, what are the core elements of politics? Core element of politics. So when you look at all the definition of politics in the world, there are 5 essential elements that you need to take into. 5 essential elements involved in the definition of politics. So these are the core elements of politics. Understand? The number 1 is actors, which means that before politics exists, there must be some actors involved. These actors can either be state actors or non-state actors. You understand now? Like your leader, the president, the governor, the senators, and the likes, they are the actors involved. After that, that's the number 1 core element of politics. The number 2 core element of politics is interest, which means that if you are involved in politics, there is usually an interest that come in, either an interest to rule, or an interest to influence, or an interest to make impact. There must be an interest. That's number 2 core element. Why the 3rd core element is power. Because when you are in the position, when you win election or when you are in a position of authority, you gain what we call power. Power to give order. Understand? Why the 4th one is conflict or competition. In politics, there is always conflict or competition. That is, you compete with the opposition party or opposition group. Understand? Sometimes it can lead to conflict. Sometimes it can just be a normal competition. Why the last core element is decision making. Decision making, the essence of going to politics is to be able to influence decision. So decision making is also the last core element of politics. So this core element, number 1, I said actors. Number 2, I said interest. Number 3, I said power. The 4th, I said conflict or competition. While the 5th one, I said decision making. When you look at all these core elements and you look at the definition of politics, you are going to find this core element if you translate or interpret your definition of politics. Which means that if you are given a definition of politics, these 5 core elements resonate in your definition of politics. Awesome. Now, the question asked in the course material is that how is politics becoming international? How did we move from politics to international politics? So, listen, this gives us the definition. This makes us to ask ourselves, what is international politics? Can anyone give me an idea of what is international politics? Somebody should reply me from your own perspective. What is international politics? Somebody here to reply us. Somebody should reply us here, please. Am I the only one here? Please, we are communicating. Somebody should reply us. What is international politics? Somebody should reply us, please. Nobody? Let me just proceed if nobody wants to reply me. See, international politics. From the name, we have international and we have politics. So international politics begins when the primary actors are sovereign states interacting beyond their border. So when the sovereign states interact beyond the border, sovereign state, what we mean by sovereign state is that when you see that a country, they try to communicate beyond their territory. You understand? The communication, the interaction they are doing, it become an international politics. Understand now? So the domestic politics is when the leader in a country make law, rules, and regulation on the people living in the particular country. That is domestic politics. But the international politics is when they tend to interact with another sovereign state beyond their own territory. Understand? So this make politics to be international. So the difference between domestic politics and international politics is the structure of how decision is made. So in domestic politics, when you look at domestic politics, I'll take an example. Nigerian domestic politics is Tinubu and his vice president making laws, making rules and regulations for Nigeria. It's only on Nigeria. Why? The international is go beyond the border, which makes the difference to be on the structure of making rules and regulation or decision-making process. You understand? I don't like the way you are not communicating with me. I don't like the way we are not communicating. It's not encouraging. Am I the only one here, Joe? Please, just let me know if I'm the only one here. If you are typing message,
you're not the only one. I'm here.
The message. I cannot read the. I've already said I cannot read the messages. If you type in a message, I cannot see your message. I cannot see the message. So we've given a definition of international politics, but one thing you need to note is that when you say international politics, you need to know that international politics or international political system is anarchic in nature. That is, there is no global authority that is giving order to other nations. But domestic politics, there is always a president or a leader that give rules and regulation to people in the country. But when it comes to international politics, there is no global government that give authority, that give rules and regulation or decisions that other country must follow. So now, the characteristics of international system or international politics. What are the characteristics of international politics? So the international politics operate under specific structure. Understand now? The number one characteristics of international system or international political system, number one characteristic is self-help. Self-help, like SELF, your self, like helping yourself. So self-help. Because there is no central guaranteed security, there is no central authority, states or countries must ensure their own survival. Understand now? Understand? States must ensure their own survival. They must lead to they build military, understand? They form alliance, strategic competition among nations, and arms race. So in essence, when we say self-help become the first characteristics of international system or international political system, the self-help, we mean that nobody is going to come and help you. You need to help yourself. Either you build military or you form alliances. That is, you mingle with powerful nations that can protect you in case there is problem. Or you go on strategic competition with another country so that they can see that you are also powerful. So that is number one characteristics of international system. The second characteristics of international system is security dilemma. Security dilemma. Security dilemma in the sense that when one state or one country increase its security, that is, they are having arms expansion, more military, more ammunition, or more weapons. If they notice that one country is having more weapons, others feel threatened and respond to that country. Understand? So once they notice that one state increase its security, other country or other state feel threatened and respond. This creates what we know as circle of mistrust. That is, the country don't trust themselves in international political system, because once they notice that you are having all the necessary military equipment, you become a threat to them. Understand? That is the second characteristics of international system. The third characteristics of international system is distribution of power. Distribution of power. That's the third characteristics of international system, which means that power is globally distributed. Understand? Because the distribution of power shape how global order is made. So international political system is power is distributed into three ways. Number one is multipolar, which means that many major powers make decisions. The second one is bipolar, which means that there is two dominant power. While the third one is unipolar, which means that there is one dominant power in the world. So currently, there is no dominant power. There is no one dominant power in the world. Listen now, we have many dominant power in the world. So for example now, during the Cold War, during the Cold War, the world was largely bipolar. That is, some people follow the USA, some people follow the USSR, the Soviet Union. But after the Cold War, understand, some people argue that the world has become unipolar. That is, so in Soviet Union is out of the map now. People are saying that it is America that is making order. So power can change, but it is usually changing through either unipolar, bipolar, or multipolar. Understand? So these are the three characteristics of international political system. Now, the nature of international politics. How is the international politics looks like? No, we've talked about the characteristics, what you see to understand how international political looks like. The nature, what are the nature? When you look at the characteristics of international system, you can infer some nature of international politics. Number one nature of international politics is state-centric orientation. State-centric. Centric is CENTRIC. State-centric orientation, which means that even though there are international organizations or international institutions such as the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and other international organizations, but you should know that the international politics focuses on the actor, the state actors. Without the state actors, there cannot be international organization. Understand? So the organization derive their own authority, their own power. They derive their own power from member states. So which means that states remain the main focus. That's number one nature. States remain the main focus of international political system. Number two, power-oriented competition is number two nature of international political system. Power-oriented competition. Which means that the international politics revolve around power. There is race for power. The power can be military power, or economic power, or technological power, or diplomatic influence, or ideological power. So in a sense, it is about power. Who get the power? The international political system. It goes around how power is. How power is being shared, and which kind of power is being shared in the structure. You understand now? So it can be either military, or economic, or technological power, or diplomatic influence, or ideological legitimacy. So in a sense, power remains the currency of international relation. Any relation that any country is doing internationally, it is about how to get influence and power. So that is the second nature of international politics. Why the third nature of international politics is persistent possibility of war. persistent possibility of war. Persistent possibility of war, which means that because the world is already anarchic, there is power competition, there is divergence of interest. Different countries have different interests, understand? And there is always mistrust. Because of this thing I mentioned, war remain a structural possibility in international politics, which means that war is inevitable. You cannot do without mentioning war in international politics. That is, war must come at a certain time. Understand? So even when there is peace, understand now, peace sometimes it is often strategic after war. That is, you cannot. Some people argue that you cannot know the value of peace if there is no war. Understand? So the world is anarchic. There is power competitions. There is mistrust, and there is divergence of interest, which makes it possible that war can happen at any time, which means all countries to be on the guard. Understand now? That is the third nature of international politics. The fourth nature of international politics is strategic behavior. Strategic behavior. Understand? So, which means that states or countries, they behave rationally under uncertainty. That is, they are not certain of what can happen. So they calculate on things. They calculate the opportunity. They calculate the threat. Understand? By the cost, the benefits, the risk, and the consequences. So they calculate on any action, any alliances a country make with another country. It is being calculated because any mistake can lead to problem to them. So they calculate the cost, the benefits, the risk, and the long-term consequences. So you cannot see a country going into another relation with another country accidentally. They will never go into another relation with another country accidentally. They go with another nation with a strategic calculation. So which means that international political system is about strategic behavior. And so why the fifth one about the nature of international politics, dynamic change. Dynamic change. When we say dynamic change, is that international politics is not static, which means it can change. Power can shift. Understand now? Power can shift. We take the example of China and Azeez. China was a poor country, but due to economic growth, China changed. China became one of the world power. So no one has a monopoly of power in international politics, which means that power can shift due to economic growth, technological innovations, leadership decision. Understand? So this creates tension. Even America, if you see that America is trying to voice that anytime, is to make sure they maintain their own position. Because if they lose guard, another country, another powerful nation is going to take over. So there's dynamic change in power. So I mentioned 5 nature of international politics. Do you understand now? Do you have any question regarding that one before I proceed? Any question before I proceed? Nobody's talking. I don't know. Any question before I proceed?
I don't have any question.
Okay, can I proceed?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you can proceed.
Now, the scope of international politics. What are the scope of international politics? That is, we talk about the characteristics, the nature, now the scope of international politics. So when you talk about international politics focuses primarily on high politics. High politics. It focuses primarily, that is, what are the focus, the scope of international politics? Understand now? So we now see the international policy, it focuses on high politics. In a sense, number one thing it focuses on is war and peace. In international politics, what is mostly discussed is war and peace. The second is national security. National security is in the sense that the primary actors in an international politics are state actors. So they tend to form alliance with another country so that the national security is being protected in case there is problem. The number 3 scope of international politics is diplomacy. Diplomacy, the dialogue between two countries, the negotiation between two or more countries. Understand? The number 4 scope of international politics is strategic alliances. Country form alliance with another country. They form partnership with another country. Number 5 scope of international politics is arm races. Armed like ARMS, like arms races, which means that you see countries looking for how to get more ammunition, more weapons. They look for war, military power. Understand? The next one, number 6, is power transition, which means that power can shift from one leader to another leader, from one state to another state. Understand now? So these are the 6 scope of international politics. So which means that when you talk about international politics, they focus on these 6 things. They focus on these 6 things I've mentioned. Understand now? Now, sometimes you might be wondering, what are the difference between international politics and international relation? Like the difference between the two. So when we talk about international relation, we talk about trade, culture, NGO, multinational corporation, human rights network, environmental issue. That is about international relation. But on the other hand, when you talk about international politics, understand, we tend to focus specifically on state behavior. Understand? State behavior, strategic interaction, power competition, and security concern. You understand now? So they are not the same thing. What they focus on is different. What in international relations, what they focus on is different compared to what they focus on when it comes to international politics. Understand? Now, these are the two, international relations and international policies, what they focus on. These are how they different. Now, approaches to the study of international politics. There is 2 approaches to the study of international politics. We have the classical approach, which is a traditional approach, and we have the behavioral approach, which is a scientific approach. These are the 2 approaches to study international politics. Now, we'll first take the traditional approach first. Now, you should know that when you talk about the traditional approach, this approach is dominated by the early scholars, early philosophers, because it relies mostly on history, philosophy, law, and normative reasoning, like the reasonings of our leaders. So in traditional approach, there are 2 in traditional approach, which means when you talk about traditional approach, you say there are 2 types of traditional approach. Understand? Idealism and realism under traditional approach. Another name for the traditional approach is classical approach. So under them, there are 2. We have the idealism and we have the realism. So now let us take idealism on its own. Understand now? So idealism became popular after World War I. After they finished the World War I, it became popular. Now, idealism in international politics, idealists believe that war is preventable. Understand? War is preventable. Which means that we can prevent war if we want to prevent it. If we want to stop war, we can stop war. Number 2 thing idealists believe on, the core assumption that they believe of idealism, number two belief of idealism is that international law can regulate state behavior, which means that the law they put an international organization, international institution can regulate how countries behave in international politics. Number 3 belief of idealism is that institution can promote peace, which means that international institutions, they can promote peace. When there's a crisis, the international institutions are there to maintain order, to maintain peace. Why the 4th belief of idealism is that cooperation is achievable, that this country can even cooperate, even though we are living in an anarchical political system or international system. So during this, after the World War I, they create what we know as the League of Nations. The League of Nations is like an international organization. But because the League of Nations failed, that's why we have the United Nations Organization, UN. Understand now? Now, we've mentioned the 4 beliefs of idealism. The core assumption of idealism is that human nature is improvable. That's number 1. Human being, the nature is improvable. Why the second one is moral principle matters in foreign policy. That is the moral principle. We know that war is not good. So on the norms, human being norms is that we should not be fighting war. We also know that it is good to be friend with another. That is cooperation. So the moral principle matters more. So when a country wants to design their own foreign policies, the idealists are saying that the moral principle matters in foreign policy. You must also put what you know that it is good and what you think is good for everybody. Understand now? So, and they also mentioned the last assumption is that collective security deter aggression, which means that they believe that collectively, if we come to secure ourselves, we can stop anything like aggression. Understand? But one thing idealism forget is that they have a weakness. The weakness of the idealists is that they underestimate the persistence of power politics. That is, they tend to neglect that countries in the world, in international political system, they tend to fight for war. And so now they tend to fight for war. That is, they want to show their prowess, because that led to the Second World War. Don't forget that we said that idealism became more popular during the First World War. After the First World War. But for us to have Second World War, which means that the idealists have failed us in some aspect, they forget that countries are stubborn. Countries go, they fight, the persistence of power. They tend to show power. These are weak. This is the core glaring weakness of idealism. So on the other hand, we have the realism. Realism is the second traditional approach to study international politics. So realism, this one emerged after the failure of idealism. Understand? After the failure of idealism, that is when realism, came out. Understand now? So when you talk about realism, you need to talk about 3 scholars, 3 philosophers of realism. Understand now? They have 3 intellectual roots. When you talk about realism, there are 3 philosophers you need to talk about. Number 1 is Niccolo Machiavelli. Number 2 is Thomas Hobbes. While number 3 is Hans Morgenthau. So in the previous class, I explained each of these philosophers. If you've watched the video, or if not watched, you can watch it also. Now, what are the core assumptions of realism? Understand? What are the core assumptions of realism? Number 1 core assumption of realism, that human nature is self-interested. That is, human being as selfish. Countries, leaders tend to find for themselves. They tend to look for what pay them, what is okay for them, not what is okay for collective people. Understand? That's number one. Number two, international system is anarchic. The realism say that international political system is anarchic because there is no central government making rules and regulations. Number three, they say that state pursue national interest, which means that even though there can be international institution, but when they get to the international institution, each country pursue their own national interest, the interest of their own country. They don't think about the collective interest. They think about the national interest. The number four core assumption of realism is that they say that power is central. That is, all nations in the world, in international political system, look for power. Understand? Why the last one is that security is primary objective of everybody. That is, protecting your territory from both internal and external attack. You understand now? So one thing you need to know is that the strength of this idealism is that it explains to war. The idealism, one of the strengths is that it explains war and competition among nations. But realism, the other one, it did not explain how war functions, how we can prevent war, how war can occur. But realism explain war and competition. Another strength of realism is that it explains balance of power politics. How power is in international political system. And the last thing, the strength is that he explains arm races. How countries look for arms, how countries look for ammunition, weapons to protect themselves. But as it has strength or advantage, the weaknesses of realism is that it underestimates international institutions. Realism did not explain to us that the international institutions also have impact in international politics. Number two weakness is that it also downplays economic interdependence and interconnectedness. That is, no country can survive economically alone. You need another country to survive. So far as countries depend on each other, so the realism forget to mention that aspect that, okay, if you are talking about competition, how is it that if you don't have something and another country have, how will you get it if you cannot cooperate? Understand? So this weakness is the weakness of the realism. Understand? So these are both idealism and realism aspects. Now, we need to move to the behavioral approach. So you should know that idealism and the realism aspect, they are known as the traditional or the classical approach to the study of international politics. Understand now? Now, to the how do you call them? Behavioral approach. The behavioral approach is also known as scientific approach. Understand now? It's known as scientific approach. Now, the scientific approach, you should know that when you say a behavioral approach, then they are emphasizing on using qualitative methods, empirical testing, hypothesis verification, statistical modeling, and data collection in politics. That is, using statistics, using research, using scientific approach, research in politics. Awesome. So this was popular in the 20th century. It was popular in the 20th century. It was influenced by a scholar. His name was David Easton. David Easton. Easton is spelled E-A-S-T-O-N. David Easton. Understand now? So it is advocating for the use of qualitative method, empirical testing, hypothesis verification, statistical modeling, and data collection in politics. Now, what are the core characteristics of behavioral approach? Characteristics of behavioral approach. Number one core characteristics of behavioral approach is that it focuses on observable behavior. Observing the behavior of how things work in international politics. Understand? Number two, predictive modeling. It tends to predict what is likely to happen in international system. If war is likely to happen, it's going to predict it. So they are going to find a way to prevent it. Understand now? And also methodological rigor, that is, it uses scientific method. The number four is theory building. After doing scientific method, it gives theories to explain the behavior in international political system. Understand now? So, for instance, the behavioral approach can tell us the frequency of war, when war is likely to happen, or the alliance patterns, which country is likely that this country is going to partner with in the future. Understand now? Or how do you call trade dependency? Which country is likely that, okay, this particular country is going to do business with? Understand? So, because it uses raw fact data, information, scientific data to bring out solutions. Now, what are the strengths or advantage of behavioralism or behavioral approach? Number one, it increases analytical precision. That is, it gives accurate information, because the information is going to pass through analytical methods, research method. Before you give an information, it has passed through research methodology. Understand? Number two, it encourages systematic research, which means that behavioralism or behavioral approach encourage systematic research. That is, research is involved when we talk about behavioral approach. Understand? And the last strength of behavioralism is that it improves predictive capacity. That is, it can predict things, because this thing is going to predict as passed through both systematic and analytical approach. These are the strengths of behavioralism. Understand? Now, when you talk about the weaknesses of behavioralism, the number one weakness of behavioralism is over reliance on quantification. It too rely on research. It's too reliant on research. That's a weakness. Understand? Some things might not pass through research. Some behavior in international politics might not pass through research. But this behavioralism too focus on quantification. Understand? Number two weakness of behavioralism is that it's difficult in capturing human psychology and leadership decision. That is, it is difficult to know the feelings of leaders. Why is some leaders behaving the way they are behaving? Listen, so you cannot know the psychology, human psychology, or the psychology of a leader, or the feelings, whether the leader take the decision because the leader is sad, or the leader is happy, or the leader is not in good time with the other. It is difficult in capturing that human psychology and leadership decisions. Understand? So these are part of the weaknesses of behavioralism. Any question before I proceed, please? Question before I proceed. Somebody should reply me. I don't just want to be talking alone. This semester is not like the last semester. This semester is a bit tougher than the last semester, but it's going to be good. Any question? Please now. Am I the only one here? Please.
No, you're not. You're not the only person here.
Question.
Not from
Mr. Caleb, question. Mr. Caleb, are you here? That's a question before I proceed.
He said no question. I think he just typed it. He said you can see
Okay. The next thing we need to look at is why study international politics? Why study international politics? Why do we study international politics? So, number one reason why we study international politics is understanding war. We need to understand war. That is, two world war has already happened. We have World War I, World War II. So the catastrophe that this war has caused and the consequences of miscalculation, because there was miscalculation. We thought that there is not going to be Second World War, but Second World War occurred. So, in order for us to understand how war occur and predict it and find a way to stop it, we need to study international politics. That's number one. Number two, studying the survivor in an interdependent world. So that is, we need to study how country survive. That is, globalization has linked many countries together in terms of economy and security. So there is need for us to study how the country that is survivor in an interdependent world, how countries survive, how countries interact together. Understand? Why the third one is policy formulation. That is, foreign policy decision making. We need to understand how it is made, how countries make policies that affect the international community. Understand? And the last one is predictive capability. That is, we also need to study how we can predict alliance shift, power transition, and conflict escalation. That is how things can occur, how what is likely to occur. Understand? So some people are saying that China has taken power from America. Some are saying no, China has not taken power from America. So we need to study this pattern. We also need to study how conflict can escalate. Currently, there is a crisis that is happening in the Middle East. How this conflict can escalate easily and how we can stop them. So we need to know how to predict. From studying international politics, you can predict things that are happening in international political system. Understand now? So these are according to the course material. Understand? So in essence, we talked about politics, international political system, and how it interacts, and how do you call the characteristics of each of them. Now, I want you to ask me a question if you have question, because I don't want to be talking alone. Don't have question. I'm done. I'm done summarizing I'm done summarizing the module 1 for you like this. I'm done summarizing the module 1 for you.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm done summarizing. From the previous class, what we did is just like we go deeply one after the other on each of the topic. But this one, I give it in a way you can just understand it simply.
So I want to ask